Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everyone to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Experts series to help you create a fulfilling second half of life. I'm Dorian Mintzer, owner of Revolutionize Retirement, and your host for today. Before I introduce Kerry, I just want to mention that I had gotten my book on Saturday. I had pre-ordered it, but I wasn't able to get to it until last evening. I haven't finished it, but it is excellent. It is filled with wonderful, impressive, inspiring stories. Plus, we'll talk more about it as we go along, but Kerry has just organized it in such a helpful way, and it's just filled with all kinds of really helpful information. So I recommend it to everybody. So let me just introduce our guest now, and we'll get going. Kerry Hannon is somebody who I consider a friend. We don't see each other very often, but I've known, I think it's maybe getting on to 12, 15 years, something like that. I can't even remember which conferences we've met at, but many places, and she's just a wonderful woman. That's just my personal bit of the introduction now. But Kerry Hannon is a leading authority and strategist on career transitions, entrepreneurship, personal finance, and retirement. She's a frequent TV and radio commentator and is a sought-after keynote speaker at conferences. Her best-selling and award-winning, she's a best-selling author and has many award-winning books, 13 of them, including her latest book, which she's going to talk about today, which is Never Too Old to Get Rich, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Starting a Business Midlife. Many of you who've been on these calls for the last few years have had the pleasure of hearing Kerry a couple of times actually before, because when her new books have come out, I've had her come join us on the call, and it's always just been very wonderful. She spent 3 decades covering all aspects of careers, business, and personal finance as a columnist, editor, and writer for the nation's leading media companies. She's currently a columnist and regular contributor to the New York Times, AARP's work and jobs expert and great jobs columnist, contributing editor and second verse columnist at Forbes, and the PBS website nextavenue.org. She's an expert and columnist on entrepreneurship, personal finance, wealth management, and careers for boomer women. And I must say, in this current book, she's integrated all of those things beautifully. She is a National Press Foundation Fellow, a Fellow of the Columbia Journalism School, and the Robert N. Butler Columbia Aging Center's Age Boom Academy. She's a former MetLife Foundation and New America Media Fellow on Aging, and she's testified before Congress about the importance of older workers. She received her bachelor's degree from Duke University, where she's currently a member of the editorial board. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband, Cliff Hackle, who's a documentary producer and editor, and her Labrador retriever, Xena. So, Kerry, I am so delighted that you're here, and I must say Kerry's sort of en route with her family, with her mother, and her husband will be joining them to their vacation spot, and she's now holed up at her cousin's so that she could be part of this call. I'm so appreciative of you making the time to be with us.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Dory. It's so great to be here. I think the favorite part of my bio is my Labrador retriever, Xena. She's my road manager, so she's with me right now, too. But it's always a delight to chat with you and I'm honored to be a guest on this wonderful program, because you always highlight some important things for all of us. And I'm delighted to share about Never Too Old to Get Rich.
Yes. So tell us what led to this book. Why don't we just start with that, and then we'll talk about entrepreneurship and all the wonderful things that you talk about in the book. But what got you interested in doing this book now?
Sure. I absolutely love telling people stories. I love talking to people about why they do what they do, how they got started, and really I find it so enriching. And so I've been over a number of my books, like What's Next was a lot of people profiles of people who shifted to do things. But increasingly, I kept coming across entrepreneurs who were starting businesses midlife or over 50 that were just doing some really interesting things. And at both for some of my outlets like the New York Times or for Money Magazine, and particularly for PBS Next Avenue, I was profiling women entrepreneurs for PBS Next Avenue, and then also some family businesses and so forth. And I kept gathering string on all these people and these stories. And I thought, I got to gather all this together and really move forward, because this is the cohort, is the demographic that is starting businesses more than any other age range, age group. And it's a global movement. It's not just in the U.S. This is really because of the longevity we're all experiencing. The possibilities are just so amazing to really be able to start these kind of businesses. So I was able to divide the book up, and actually PBS Next Avenue co-branded this book with me, which I really appreciate. And I divided it up into 4 sections. So the first is people who started a business from a passion or a hobby. The second group are social entrepreneurs, people who started nonprofits, small nonprofits or what have you, to give back. The third group, like the senior junior partnerships, which we'll talk about. And the final group are women, because they're my peeps. I heard so many wonderful stories. So that's how the impetus got started.
Oh, that's great. And I did mention, in case some of you came on late, I'm not 100% through the book yet, but far enough through. I would say about 3/4 of it through. It's really so well written. The stories are very inspiring and incredible amounts of tips, which we're going to hear about today. So it is interesting to think about the over 50, over 40, over 50 population. I know you start out the book with a lot of statistics, which I think are probably helpful for the listeners to know about why this stage of life. Could you share some of those?
Sure. And some of the big numbers are that over the past decade, the highest rate of entrepreneurial activity belongs to the 55 to 64 age group, and that's according to the Kauffman Foundation. The researchers there have really drilled down into looking at these older entrepreneurs and so forth, and it's fascinating, that cohort there. And in fact, women in that demographic, women over 50 are starting businesses faster than others, in African American women even more so, women of color. So we see a lot of movement with women starting businesses. More than half of all U.S. small business owners are age 50 years and over, according to the Small Business Administration. And this one I think is interesting. Older entrepreneurs are more successful. 70% of their startups last more than 3 years, compared with 28% for younger startups. You see this sort of swell of activity there. And there was an interesting survey that about looking at some of the older workers and the importance of work experience for successful ventures and refuting the conventional wisdom. I think there was a study out of MIT that successful entrepreneurs are middle-aged, not young. Get rid of you're not thinking about the techies and the hoodies and the all-bird shoes and that sort of thing. That age, the researchers said, we find that age indeed predicts success, and sharply, but in the opposite way that many observers and investors propose. The highest success rates really did come from this middle age and beyond. And I found that pretty provocative. And so that's another reason why I've really latched on to this idea. But they did find that the fastest growing new ventures in the past decade came from those 45 and older.
That's so important to hear, and it really challenges some of the myths that we have about it all being downhill, or that older people aren't as competent or capable. So why do you think that the older business owners have this advantage now, even though people haven't necessarily seen it that way?
It is interesting, Dory, because not only this is a time in your life where clearly you have built up this body of experience. You have knowledge. And I will add that in terms of success rates of entrepreneurship in this age group, the ones where people start businesses within an industry that they know, that they've worked in some angle of it, they find it. So you've built up this body of knowledge and experience. That is a huge help in getting started. Not only is that a built-in network, you understand your customers perhaps, so you have where to go to ask for help, to learn more. So you have that surrounding you. Secondly, you have greater management experience, greater marketing experience, perhaps financial experience, and as I mentioned, the industry knowledge, but importantly, you have financial resources that you can tap to help you start. Not everyone has this, but it is often critical because so often startups for many startups, but definitely in this age, midlife entrepreneurs are self-funded or friends and family. So having resources that you can tap really does give you the ballast to get started.
And I think maybe down the road we can talk a little about different ways of funding things, but it does make a lot of sense that working in a field that you know about, but it's even broader than that, as you're just saying, that sort of just having years of experience and knowing how to manage, maybe knowing how to make mistakes and bounce back from it, all of that bodes well for older people and older workers. So what have you found? I know there's some wonderful stories in the book, but what seems to motivate someone to decide to start a business when they're in midlife?
This is a fascinating thing. There's a common spine of what people do that helps them get started. But when I talk about what is the thing that made them pause and say, hey, I think I want to do this, the thing that kept coming back to me was either someone had been downsized from a job and found it, taken an early retirement package or whatever, but really weren't ready to retire. They weren't ready to stop working. Retire wasn't in their vocabulary. And they were frustrated by this, you talk about a lot on your program, ageism. It's alive and well in the workplace. Mm-hmm. They found it frustrating to try to find a full-time position within an organization again. And they just got fed up with the job hunt and said, you know what, I'm going to try doing something on my own. So there's that group of people. There were individuals who, at this stage in life, a lot of the big ticket items are behind you. The kids may be launched. They had achieved a lot of goals they had set out to in their primary career, which was fairly linear. And something had happened, whether it was a personal health crisis, maybe it was cancer, maybe it was a heart issue, anything. It could have been a variety of health issues, but something personal that caused them to go, is this really what it's all about? Is there something more that I've always wanted to do or I should be doing? Or it could even have been the loss of someone close to them that they realized the sort of fleeting nature of life and the importance of grabbing hold of dreams. And I know that sounds a little flowery, but it's true. It's like, okay, I've always had this nailing idea, and maybe this is my time. There were several forces, or it could have been a big picture thing in the world that caused them to think about, this is my time to do something to change the way things are. So there were several things that may have prompted them to do this, but these were the kinds of events in their lives that caused them to push forward and take that chance, take that risk to try something new.
So it sounds like sometimes it's externally motivated and sometimes it's really much more internally motivated, like kind of is this all there is, and wanting to do something they've always wanted to do. Helen from Canada, I just want to add this question right now from Ottawa, just wonders what's considered middle age currently? And she says she just finds this challenging to describe and is constantly confronted with the question. Yeah. So how are you defining middle age?
Well, I'm looking at normally, like Dory, for my books, I almost always have been the 50 plus crowd, right? So Gen Xers and Boomers. But for this book, I decided let's push it down just a little bit. So when I say midlife here, I'm thinking 40s and up, 45 and up, and I think that's a pretty fair way to look at midlife.
And I think people nowadays talk about this second adulthood. Midlife is 45, 50 to 75. So have this longer time period of midlife. So
much longer runway to do lots of great things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody just is thinking about wanting to launch her or his own business, what are the steps you've been seeing? How does somebody prepare to even think about it, let alone do it?
Yeah, there's some good steps to take, and I think they work for almost everyone. The first thing you really need to do is, I like journaling. I'm a big fan of whether you do it by hand or on the computer or whatever. But you do that soul-searching piece of it. Why you? Why now? Why this business? What can you bring that somebody else out there is not doing? And this takes being really honest with yourself. So I think that's some search work that you need to do initially. And the big thing is no rash moves. I always say that. Don't do anything quickly. This is starting your own business is a process. This does not happen overnight. This is something that they're building blocks, and there's no ideal time to get started. But that's a good start, is really looking at why. And second piece of that, within the next step, is to start reaching out and talking to people who are doing that kind of work in that field, the kind of business you're thinking of starting. Who do you know that's in that field? Can you call them and say, hey, can I have coffee? People love to talk about their work, their jobs. And if you're not asking them for a job, then you have a good chance that they're going to sit down with you. Reach out and find out, how did they get there? What does it take to succeed in that field? So that's doing that level of research. Then you might need to add some skills or certification. I'm not talking about going back for a master's degree, but start by taking one course in the area that interests you and find out, is this really what you're interested in? And that's a good way, or if you do need a certification, get that ahead of time. So you build slowly towards the process. The next thing is, if possible, can you moonlight or volunteer or do the job first, whatever field that's in, that is going to be related to your business, because it might feel that it's a really dreamy thing to do. And when you're actually doing it as your business, not so much. And one story that I like to recount is a woman I know who took an early retirement package from a law firm, and she had this very high-powered job, but she was an absolutely phenomenal gardener, and she just loved gardening. And so she thought, we're going to start a landscape design business. And she did. And when she got out in the garden and it was her business, she was miserable because it had been something that was her respite. It was her place to go to recharge. But when it became her daily work, it was so lonely, and it wasn't the person that she is. She's a people person. So she realized that she didn't have a lot invested. It was fine. She could move on. But it's just an example of how you need to really try to do that job first if possible. So those are some important steps. The one point when I look at the ones that, and again, I profile 20 entrepreneurs in this book, Never Too Old to Get Rich, and I profile winners. And I do that on purpose because I think we learn from those who succeed. And one common thread was everyone said to me, you have got to know how to sell. Because even if you're not the marketing person, you're going to have to be able to sell your family on what you're doing, or those close to you. Perhaps you have to sell investors if you're trying to raise capital. You certainly need to attract customers. So we might think it's silly, but the ability to sell is the core of being a successful business person. Even if you think, that's not me, I'm not that extroverted person, take a course in sales. If you can go to a community college, take a marketing course, add that to your wheelhouse. If you want to doesn't hurt to go to Toastmasters and learn how to be a public speaker, take a public speaking class, take an improv class at a community college. Anything you can do to learn to be comfortable on your feet and talking in front of audiences and talking ad lib, just so you can articulate what it is you're selling, what it is you're doing, what your business is all about. So that is something that cannot be, I say it's non-negotiable. So often many people, entrepreneurs I talk to, actually worked in sales in parts during stages of their career. And not that I'm a good example, but I consider myself an entrepreneur because I started my own business about 15, 16 years ago. And my first job was selling Avon, and I went door to door, and I learned how miserable that can be and how hard it is to take rejection. But so I talked about the importance of sales. The inside knowledge of an industry really can give you the edge, and you've got to love the nitty-gritty of running a business. I interview a woman named Ginny Corbett who has Salad Juicery in Swickley, Pennsylvania. And Ginny said, yeah, she is a people person. She said, I'd love to be out there with my customers, serving them my juices and smoothies. But she said, if I'm not in my office every day actually running, the business is not going to run. She really had to pull herself back and say, I've got to be dealing with payroll and the business of running a business. So you've got to embrace that. Not everyone is hardwired to do this. The other thing, and Dori, you'd probably relate to this a little bit, a career coach or a coach of some kind, a retirement coach, if you're thinking of this as a retirement business, can really smooth your move into entrepreneurship, because this is a person who is unbiased. They can sit down with you and help you make this transition to being an entrepreneur. And they can help you translate the experiences that you've had and your skill set into what you want to do. And this can be an important early stage step to take before you launch a business, is really peeling it back. How do I actually make this transition? How can I speak as a small business person? How do I introduce myself now that I'm not who I was in my previous career? And I think your identity is often tied up with who you were prior to becoming an entrepreneur and launching a small business. So this is important in that it might go into that soul-searching stage, but I really like that. And finally, the last thing is we talked about volunteering or moonlighting. If you can start it as a side gig, that's a really good way to start your business, because you're still working full-time elsewhere, but you've got this thing going on the side and you're slowly letting it gain traction.
Again, I think these are wonderful suggestions, because what I'm hearing you say is that there are some risks involved, and it's like trying to figure out how do you mitigate some of the risks. And part is earning some other money while you're doing it, talking with people, shadowing. What other kind of risks? I'm just trying to think about some of the stories that I've read, but since you wrote it, what are some of the risks that you found of starting a business during these kind of middle-aged retirement years?
Yeah, Dori, the number one stumbling block is money. Without question. Debt is a dream killer is one of my favorite lines. And if you launch into something like this and you have debt, and this is no way to start a business. You have to be, and we can talk more about this, but you absolutely have to be financially fit and nimble, because when you start a business, you might not be able to pay yourself initially as you reinvest money back in the business to help it grow. And even when you do start taking a salary, it's not going to be the income you had in your primary career. It is very important to do a budget and really be lean and mean. Can you downsize your home? Can you pay down those credit card debts if you have them? Whatever it is that might get in your way of being able to really live and be frugal and mindful, because if you want this business to succeed, you need to really have a tight rein on living costs and your own expenses. And again, one huge mistake that some people might be tempted is to tap into their retirement accounts. And that is a big no-no. And so the problem with that is at this age, if you're younger and you happen to tap into your retirement accounts to help you with the startup costs of a business, you have time to recover that. But at this stage, if you're tapping into your retirement accounts to finance a business, and it doesn't succeed, you're leaving yourself very vulnerable for your future and financial security as you age.
I think that's so important. I know you have some advice and suggestions of sort of other avenues, and it's in the book, but could you mention a few alternatives so people don't get themselves in that situation?
I think number one is, as I said before, most people self-fund. So if you can have built up some resources that you feel comfortable, that is non-retirement money to tap into to help you launch, is really nice because you're running the ship. Friends and family, not a bad way. You might be able to get a loan from friends and family that is at a very reasonable interest rate, and they can also be very forgiving if the business has setbacks or periods of time where you can have some elasticity in your payment method with them, and they understand. So you don't want to ruin friendships. You don't want to ruin family relations. So you need to have this all written down on paper. But that can be a nice avenue to follow as a possibility. Today, it's possible to get a bank loan. There's no question you can do that. A woman I know who started a CLE urban winery in Cleveland, she was retired military, and she launched this really terrific in Cleveland. And she was able to get bank financing for her small business launch. And she really used a lot of the skills she had used in her career, military career, that helped her write a business plan and present to this group. But it's important to look for a bank or a lender that's in your community that maybe understands the industry that you're launching into, so they have experience with it, and maybe you have other banking relationships with them. So there's a comfort level there, and they're going to still want you to have some skin in the game to show that you're investing yourself in your launch. But that's certainly possible. The Small Business Administration has, their website has financing options there, and banks that have SBA guaranteed loans, which is, there tend to be low interest, and that's a nice way to go as well. If you tap into crowdfunding, is actually a curious way. If you're starting in a small way, there's increasingly, I've met entrepreneurs who have started by launching a crowdfunding campaign that is not a loan. These are people that are just it's not a lend. They're supporting your idea and your launch, and not necessarily huge amounts of money, but it's enough perhaps to get started in a small way. Funding is one possibility. Some people use credit cards. I don't advise it, but if you have a very low interest, there are banks that have great credit cards, financial services companies that are set up for the small business world. And a woman one of my favorite gurus who I quote in the book, and she offers advice, Jerry Detweiler, offers advice from her group NAV on what are some of those credit cards. And look around and see what might be possible. There is financing available for women particularly. You might find groups that are specifically set up to help women entrepreneurs with economic development. The SBA has these women's development groups around the country. And go and tap into your SCORE resources. Small Business Administration has partnered with SCORE, SCORE. They have opportunities in most cities around the country that they can pair you with a mentor for free. It's free advice. It's free counseling to help with a business plan. And they can also help direct you to funding sources. So it's really worth checking out SCORE to see where they might be able to help you.
Great. And SCORE, for any of you who don't know, it's SCORE, and it's score.org. And I think you're right that it's really around the country. I don't know if there may be comparable kind of things. I know we have some people globally on this call, but it's something at least in this country. I want to integrate a question from John from Massachusetts right now, because I think it's a really good question at this juncture at the moment. He said he recently bought your other book, one of your other books, Great Jobs for Everyone 50 Plus, which he found excellent. And he says, how would you advise someone who's trying to choose between finding a job or starting a business?
Gosh, can you do both? No, it can be a dilemma. What I've found is a lot of people who have been trying to find that job have ended up starting a business because of the frustration in the job process. If you really have this burning desire to launch a business, fantastic. But you may still, if you can get that regular paycheck coming in and you can start that business on the side in a small way, that's not a bad model to use, at least initially. Again, I find that it's difficult often over 50 to find a full-time position, but if you can, you could delay. But I think people who want to start businesses, they want to start business. So if that's your dream, I say this is your time to go for it. It depends on your financial security. If you're concerned about paying the bills, don't go starting a business. As we talked about, financial fitness is a key step here. So if you need a regular paycheck in order to pay the mortgage or pay your health insurance bills or your whatever that might be, then by all means go for that paying job that you're not responsible for the day-to-day.
Thanks. Maybe this would be a good time to talk about, because you mentioned the financial fitness, and I know you have this kind of 3-part fitness plan. Can you share that with the listeners?
Yes, I can. I absolutely love Kerry's fitness plan. So the first step, as we've talked about it, is financial fitness, all right? So that's really debt is a dream killer stuff. Get lean and mean. Can you downsize your home? Can you move to some place that's maybe relocate somewhere where the cost of living is less? These are really, doing that budget, where can you cut back? You want to be as strong financially as possible before you launch. But this is also good for almost anything in life, truthfully. But the second piece of my plan is physical fitness. And what physical fitness, I don't mean running fast miles or bench pressing. I'm talking about having some sort of exercise regime in your life, whether it's swimming, I walk my dog a couple of miles a day, whatever you can do to eat with an eye to nutrition. When you are physically fit, it does wonders to battle ageism. And I'm saying even it's not ageism in looking for a full-time job. This is ageism even at starting your own business. If you're going to try to get financing, if you're trying to find customers, people judge a book by its cover. There's no denying it. And when you have this energy, when you're physically fit, you have this oomph factor, you have this energy, this can-do spirit, this positivity that people don't necessarily identify what that is about you, but they want to be around you. They want to be on your team. They want to be part of whatever it is you're doing. So I think physical fitness is something that is not to be taken lightly. It's really important in most things we do in life, but certainly, and again, also when you're starting a business, you need this energy. You need this extra boost that you can get from physical fitness. The third piece is spiritual fitness. And I'm not talking religion. There's nothing wrong with that. But in this instance, what I mean is it's very stressful starting a business, and you need to have some place that you can go that's a source of ballast. That's whether it's meditation, yoga, tai chi, throw out walking my dog again. Whatever it is you can do to find a centering place that you can quiet things down, you can build sort of the spiritual strength from that calmness that comes. And we all will need this as you put together your business plan, your launch, your venture, and sustain it. These three pieces of a plan are really important. Whereas people will often say to me at this age, and it can be anything over 40, 45, is, should I get Botox? Should I dye my hair? And I'm like, yeah, if you really want to. But better yet, get physically fit, because that is going to be your ticket. So those three pieces, I think, are truly integral to that. And one thing, Dory, I want to add that, okay, we all talk about, and this whole book is about starting your own business, but please remember that nothing is forever. At this stage in our lives, it's like a patchwork quilt. You might start one business and you might have another business. You might have 2 or 3 different kinds of things you're doing, depending on whether you're doing these micro businesses or almost as a consultant. You might have several things going at once. So it's very fluid. I often don't want to think of this like you maybe did your linear career, because this is an organic process, launching a business. And people get stuck on this thing, I'm starting, this is going to be for the rest of my life. Not necessarily. In my book, What's Next, I profiled people who had done one thing for 20 or 30 years and turned to do something completely different. A lot of them started businesses. When I went back, it was a hardcover book. When I went back to update that book for the paperback version a couple of years later, I found that a third of them had moved on to different things. Some of them still had their core business, but some of them had added other things. Others had sold their businesses and started something new. Go a little easy on yourself, and it doesn't have to be so daunting as we might want to make it out to be.
Again, more helpful advice. How about, can you give some just examples from the book of people who made this transition? Maybe some example. You had said before, and I think it's true, to be careful about turning your hobby into work, and it may it may destroy the hobby, but I know sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Can you give some examples of sort of situations where it has worked and what you think maybe helped make it work?
Yeah, that was my big thing, Dory. I always told everyone, don't ruin your hobby. Come on, don't do that. But in doing research for this book, I found that there were studies out there showing that people who start businesses from their hobby or their passion often are more successful. They don't start off as quickly. It's like a tortoise and hare sort of thing, but over time they're more successful because they do know their customer. They have been the customer. They know what the needs are. And so while they're a little more careful as they start, they tend to have longevity in it. There's a couple of fun stories in the book. There's a guy I profile from Matthews, North Carolina, who started a business called Carolina Fun Machines, which are scooters. And Tim Junkin, his career was with IBM primarily and as a salesperson, but his passion his whole life was motorcycles. He absolutely loved motorcycles, and he would actually just ride all over the country whenever he could on his motorcycle. But he started this business, and it was something that he had retired and his wife was still working as a school teacher, and he just couldn't. I don't want to just sit around at home. And he had always liked being a mechanic as well as motorcycles. When he was a kid in the summer, he worked on boat engines at water ski shows. And he had this real ability to understand the mechanical nature of things. So when he started this scooter business, he started fairly small, and it has really grown into this nice business for him. I think he started it as an antidote to being bored, but it has really grown into, I think the statistic, like he told me, he used to put in 7,000 miles a year on his Kawasaki, riding from Charlotte to Canada and stuff. But for him, he never had any second guessing, but his preparation really helped him get started. And now he's bringing in over $900,000 in revenue a year. So it's pretty extraordinary, right? He's really built a big business out of selling scooters. It's back to liking motorcycles, liking mechanics and all that sort of thing. Another woman I know started a business. She loved horses. She was a nurse, but her passion was horses, and woodworking, interestingly enough, was something that her grandfather did. And as a little girl, she used to watch her grandfather in his wood shop. And when she was a young adult, she started playing around with wood carving a bit. But she had her career as a nurse, and she had long since given up riding horses. And so she got very burned out in nursing, and Joan Sadler is her name, and she started this business carving wood, things out of mahogany and so forth, like horsey items. Maybe it would be planters, flower planters in shapes of horses and things, or bridle racks or trunks and she would bring her goods and set up a little exhibition at horse shows. And that's where I met her, because I show horses. And she had this lovely little setup. And the horse people started buying her woodworking materials, and they're fantastic. And is she making a fortune? Absolutely not. Does she love what she's doing? Yes. She said, Kerry, I sit there and I set up my tent and I have my various woodworking goods for sale, and people do custom orders with her. And I sit here, she said, at these horse shows, and I watch these beautiful horses walk by me every day, and everyone convenes on her tent to talk to her. She's a very social person. And it's just happy work, and she's managing to make a business. It's slowly growing. And so it's a small micro example compared to the scooter business, but she's absolutely loving it. And those are combining two passions.
And do you recommend that people really take time? You mentioned the word preparing, and I tend to believe in my coaching work about the preparing, but what are some of the preparing steps? Because you've mentioned in some examples a business plan or talking to people. What have you been discovering are some of the important preparations that help in the difference between the succeeding and not succeeding?
And I think it's really reaching out to people who can help you. And that's something that's often hard for people to do. But really, networking is going to help you, whether you're tapping into alumni associations or industry groups in your town or what have you. But reaching out to others, not being afraid to ask for help, because in today's world, it's easier than ever to start a business. You don't need bricks and mortar. You can start a business from your home office with your computer, and you can hire people to help you that are virtual helpers. You don't have to come into your office with you. You can hire them on a contract basis to help you with bookkeeping or your social media presence or marketing. If certain kinds of business really flourish through the use of Instagram, if you're not up to speed on that, hire somebody who is. And it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money, and you're paying a full payroll, but you have access to lots of virtual helpers now. And that's something that people often don't realize the importance of it. There's a service I really like. A guy named Brian Kurth started it called Pivot Planet, and it connects people with expert advisors who are working in like hundreds of professions, and you can do one-on-one sessions with them, video conferences on phone, in person, and you'll pay for that time. But I'm telling you, it's a great way to get a virtual mentor. So that's what you have to be specific about what you need. But this stumbling block of not asking for help is important to remember. And there are lots of free resources out there that can help you. Take your time. One that with PBS Next Avenue, we work a lot with a group called EIX.org. EIX has a lot of great resources to help you get started. And again, the Small Business Administration is amazing. But so look around and see where you can find. If you're a woman in business, you might consider looking for certification as a woman-owned business. This can be a real leg up for women in getting that certification. It's not simple to get, but it can really help you do that. And again, it's starting by testing these things out with friends and family and slowly building it out. A mother-daughter team I profile in the book called their business is One Hot Cookie, and they're out of Youngstown, Ohio. And the mom, Bergen, she started the business and she kept her full-time job. It was something, baking cookies, that she and her daughter Morgan did for fun. She was a single mom. It was something they loved to do together. They started sampling it out to friends and family bit by bit while she kept her full-time job the whole time. Finally, when she felt comfortable enough, they opened a retail store, and now they've been steadily growing, and they've actually started doing a little franchising of their retail stores in the concept. So again, it's being willing to start it while you're still working that full-time job so you're not dependent on it to pay your bills.
And that's a beautiful example of the multi-generational. And I wonder if you could, I know you have a few other examples in the book, and you talk about legacy multi-generational businesses. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, thanks. These are I say I love my women entrepreneurs, but these senior junior partnerships, to me, is the future. As we're having longevity, people are starting businesses at later stages in their life. And folks in their 20s and 30s are having trouble finding jobs beyond contract positions. And, you have to have 5 years experience before we're going to hire you. How am I going to get hired? So they're having trouble too. When you pair somebody who's younger and somebody who has the experience, it's a dynamic combination of the energy, perhaps the tech skills, all these bubbling creative new ideas of someone who's younger with someone who has those things we mentioned before, perhaps access to capital, the experience, the network, the wisdom, the resilience. I've been through this before. You put these two together and it has the potential to really be a business that's not just for 5 years, but this is a business that can last for 10 years and longer, onward, 20 years. You've got this ability of partnering these two generations that I really am encouraged about the possibilities here. And there's a group, they're not in the book because they're just getting going, but it's business that matches older and younger entrepreneurs, and I wrote about them for Next Avenue, and they really do a nice job. It's called, I'm trying to think of what the correct name of their business is, but it's the Sugarmans who started this, and it's called 4Gen Now, and so they try to connect people with the two generations, which I think that's the correct name of their it's a business that they've got going. So it's getting somebody who's younger and older, match them, but I think we'll see more of this pairing of the generations together to really achieve success. And a couple in the business in the book that I talk about, and Never Too Old to Get Rich, is there's a gentleman in Washington, D.C. he retired as a lawyer from Verizon, and with his son-in-law, they started a gin distillery. They make Green Hat gin in Washington, D.C., and oh my goodness, it's really amazing. And they've started up this nice business that is doing tremendously well, and the son-in-law had experience in the beverage industry in Washington. He loves doing the tastings and the going to the bars and spreading the good word about it. And the senior entrepreneur, he actually, because of his legal background, was able to figure out how to get through all the different steps in Washington to get the regulations, to get it up and running. And the two of them, it's called New Columbia Distillers is their business. And he had a 30-year legal career. But the combination of these two has such an appeal, this two-generation team, that I love their story, and they're doing extremely well. But it's the combination of both of their skills and their talents that's making it a success.
And I think in that example, it was a father and a son-in-law, if I remember.
Yes, a father and a son. Yep. And then another one that maybe some of your listeners know is Paul Tasner, who started Pulpworks out in California. And Paul, he paired up with someone who's, I think she was 2 decades younger than him. She was an architect, and he found her through LinkedIn, but she was 2 decades younger than him. And the two of them have made, and he's in his early 70s now, I believe, and he had a 40-year career working for corporations like Clorox and California Closets and stuff, but with an emphasis on packaging. And he started this really interesting business, but it's the intergenerational pairing that he feels, as does she, that has made the two of them successful with this endeavor.
That's great. I want to go back a moment to women because you said working with women is one of your favorite things. And you mentioned women over 50 are the fastest growing demographic for entrepreneurship worldwide. Why do you think that is, and what are the biggest challenges for women? What would be helpful for the listeners to learn from you about that?
I think that women are starting businesses because more, and it's not like he said, she said, but for women, my goodness, it is really hard to get back into the workforce at this age, and there's a lot of ageism that women face. It's even more so than men do often. And I do believe there's women also who have maybe stepped out of the workforce to raise a family, and now they want to get back to work. There's a lot of reasons that push them into starting their own businesses, and again, a lot of it is frustration in that job search. The biggest stumbling block for women really is financing. You'll find if any, very little venture capital money is being invested in women-owned businesses. It's startups. Women find a hard time getting bank loans, or good luck. It's really hard. A lot of their businesses are self-funded and through friends and family. And so I do believe that money is their biggest challenge. But what I've got to say is that women are amazing entrepreneurs. And there's so many reasons why, but some of the important reasons that why I think, and what I've discovered through my research for Never Too Old to Get Rich, is that women are great collaborators. We are very good at partnering up with people. We know how to say, this is what I'm good at, and this is what you're good at. Let's see if we can bring these two things together and build a business. Women are not afraid to ask for help. Say, ask for directions, okay. So this is what I find, that women are much more open to this collaborative nature. And also, they're not trying to hit it out of the ballpark right away with their business. They start slow. They do their homework. It's like how women approach investing as well. And it's quite a successful formula because they do their homework. They take it in baby steps. They don't overreach at first. They allow things to grow organically. So women on many levels are truly hardwired to be successful entrepreneurs, and they'll stay the distance. They really put in the time. But I think that reaching out and being willing to collaborate is important. There's two women who partner up in the book that started a stationery business in Pittsburgh, and the one was the creative mind behind it all, and she was the designer, and she loved paper. The other one came from an investment banking background. She understood finances and money and how to run the business. It made them a powerful combination. They both had very good people skills, so they were good in front of people, and that's an important part of that business as well. But I think pairing the creativity with the financial brain really made it for a powerful combination.
Another wonderful example. And again, I do recommend that you read the book. There's some really terrific stories. And in each chapter, Kerry asks the same question, sort of what got you into it, what are the challenges, what do you recommend? It really, and with just amazing resources. I'm noticing the time, and so I want to also have you share the Kerry Hoover method that I know you mentioned in other books too, but this one too. But not all of the listeners may have heard about your, do you call it Hover? The Hover method, not Hoover.
I call it Hover. I call it Hover. And the thing about Hover is, and love's a good acronym, right? What Hover to me is, okay, so we start with the H, right? So hope, if you're going to launch a business, hope is vital. You have got to believe that you can reach your goals. This is something that you'll find a way to do this. It's not like you can't. It's how can. It's how can I? How can we? So this is a muscle, a psychological muscle that you need to develop. But hope is truly vital. Optimism is the O, and optimism is different than hope. Optimism is having an upbeat view of your work and your potential for success. And to me, optimism is a core factor in truly loving what you do every day. If you gives you this, that you can take action, that you see the possibilities. When you're optimistic, people succeed. You see the possibility that there are possibilities and there are solutions, and that you accept when things fail. Not everything's going to go your way. There are going to be setbacks, but you bounce back quicker. And it's truly something that you can develop optimism, I find, by simply keeping a journal. You write down every day positive things that happen to you. There are at least a handful every day. I do this, and people call it a gratitude list, whatever. But optimism stems from gratitude. The V is value. And value is essential because you have got to value who you are, the work you're doing, the skills you have, and what this business is going to do, what difference your business is going to make in the world or touching people. And so value is something that you know that if you put in the effort, you are going to get results. And you can build value. You can build value by learning new things. Successful people, successful entrepreneurs are lifelong learners. They're constantly adding to their knowledge, and that is creating value every day in who you are and what you can do. Enthusiasm is the E in Hover. Enthusiasm. That's like the old get up and go. If you're eager, again, that kind of goes back to people wanting to be with you. It brings a certain, I call it the oomph factor. It's that thing that the people go, oh, I want to be part of what she or he is doing. I want to know more about their company. I want to participate in it some way. So enthusiasm is really critical. And the final piece is resilience. And we all hear a lot about resilience. But in fact, that really is truly the knack for springing back from setbacks. And you can really teach yourself to be resilient. And frankly, at this age, when you're starting a business midlife, you tend to be more resilient because you have weathered a lot of storms. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you've come through the other side. So that ability to be resilient is really the heart of running your own business because every day is not going to be the perfect day. So you need to be prepared to do that. So that's why I tell everybody, think about these 4 letters and what they can up on high looking down at you and how you can add those pieces, those ingredients to your puzzle.
Well, there are actually 5 pieces, so I just need to clarify that part. So to add the pieces of the puzzle. In your work, what are some of the biggest surprises that you learned in your research for this book?
That even though we all think money rules the day, most of these individuals who, whether it's a tiny business or a larger business, money really, even though this book says never too old to get rich, and I truly believe that it is important to build your bank account. But money was not the motivating factor. For most of them, it was, and again, was that inner richness, that inner reward they get and they have received from starting their own businesses, from being their own boss, from making a difference in the world and achieving something they never thought they would be able to do is running their own shop. This inner richness is really the spine and the thing that it's intangible, but that really was what spurred them on in the days where the going got rough, was this reward that they couldn't put a price tag on of being their own boss and that freedom that it gave them. And even though they're working harder than they ever did, some of them, it's that sense of autonomy, of freedom. And to me, that really was surprising because you often think of it in a kind of a real economic sense of why someone would want to start a business. But I found that the true motivator was something much, much deeper.
We're nearing the hour, and I want to respect, because I know you're ready to start on your vacation. You mentioned that there are kind of 8 tips on how to become a successful entrepreneur. So I wonder if, as we are pulling things together and wrapping up, I know you've mentioned many, but can you just mention what you would pull together as the 8 tips to become a successful entrepreneur in midlife?
No, you're right. No, it's really true. Some of the things that I think it's important, and this is one I haven't mentioned, but it does relay in, is the sense of curiosity and wanting to be willing to open your mind to new ways. You may start down a path of starting a business, but if you're curious, you may find that business takes a little turn in a different direction than what you had envisioned initially. So having that willingness to open up your mind to what your business may ultimately be is going to be important. The point, Dory, I think I hit some of these tips, but we'll do it again, is the fact that when it comes to starting your own business, I mean, you really need to take a breath and realize that entrepreneurship is a process. So do that soul searching, pick up the phone, ask for help, downsize, really plan your financial life. Because, as I say one more time, debt is your dream killer. Become physically fit, become spiritually fit, reach out to your networks and your professional contacts. I can't overemphasize the importance of networking to help get your business off the ground and to grow. You want your network, your tribe, your believers. Those are the ones who are going to propel you towards success. Don't ignore looking for help in the small business arena. Your town's Rotary Club or Chamber of Commerce can be a wonderful source. A local chapter of SCORE, as we mentioned, it's a nonprofit association that's really devoted to teaching entrepreneurs the ins and outs of getting underway. Really be clear about what education or training you might need before you launch, and look for free resources and see what you can do and just get started. There's no ideal starting point.
Wonderful advice. Why don't you, before your final takeaway to people, let people know how they can get a copy of your book and about your website and all of that?
Oh, thank you, Dory. Dory, it's just such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. The best way, if you go to my website, which is kerryhannon.com, KerryHannon.com. You'll see the Never Too Old to Get Rich right up there on the homepage. There's links to, obviously, on Amazon, on IndieBound, Barnes & Noble, what have you. There are a couple of booksellers there you can look for. Wiley is my publisher. So but my website will be a good place to launch off, or just do a search for it. But it's out there. It's available. There's also going to be the audiobook, I think, is available soon, which was a blast to record. I had so much fun. And there'll be an ebook. So there's lots of different ways to read it and enjoy it. And anyone can reach out to me with an email, Kerry@KerryHannon.com. I'm happy to lend advice, answer questions, any of the above.
You certainly are the epitome of your hover method of this optimism and value and enthusiasm and resilience and hope. You're just wonderful. I love our connections and having you share your wonderful insights to people. So what final message would you like to leave with people today? What are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to hit on that theme once again, that the true, genuine wealth that we can get by being an entrepreneur and starting your own business is that inner richness that comes from doing work that energizes you with people who make your life richer and making an impact on the world in some meaningful fashion. This is what makes our lives rich, and that's what we need to focus on. And man, it's fantastic if you can make some great money from your business, and it's a huge financial success, and I want it to be for you. But don't ever forget that the true beauty of running your own business is that inner reward.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. I think that's part of the joys, if we think about it. The joy of becoming an older entrepreneur is that inner richness in being able to still be curious and create and follow your dreams. Or not, but your dreams. Thank you so much, Kerry, for taking the time. And I want to thank everybody who's been part of this call, too. And have a wonderful vacation. I know you're off there with your
Thank you.
Your mother and Lena, your Labrador Retriever, and all of that. So thanks so much for taking the time.
We're going to have 4 generations together. Yep.
Oh, that's one. And your mom, how old?
She's 90.
90. That's
90.
Wonderful. We'll enjoy the 4 generations
and
together.
The youngest member will be 5 months.
Oh, that's wonderful. We talk about intergenerational and multi-generational, so enjoy. And thank you. And congratulations on your book. I'm so pleased that we were able to have it be right as it came out. So it's wonderful. So I recommend people check out Kerry's website. I got my copy through Amazon, and I really do think you're going to find it extremely helpful. So thanks again to all of you, and Kerry, thanks again for being part of this and taking time. So take care.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.